Welcome to This Is Money podcast. I'm Georgie Frost, and joining me and editor Simon Lambert today is deputy editor Helen. And coming up, can you dodge the April pain from energy to broadband? We outline all the bills going up and tell you how you could save up to £3,000. Plus, the big tax changes on the way, how a 1p pay rise could cost you 20 grand. We have some end-of-year tax tips for high earners, and we round up the best cash ISAs. Don't forget you stay up to date with all the latest breaking money news. Just go to thisismoney.co.uk or download the app.
Don't forget, you can stay on top of what's going on in the markets by tuning in to the Digest and Invest podcast by eToro. Go to your regular podcast platform and listen on the go. Digest and Invest by eToro, the podcast for those interested in trading and investing.
But first, brace yourself. The next month is going to be painful. An assault on your wallet, energy and broadband bills, water rates, taxes, even NHS prescriptions and stamps. You name it, they are likely to be going up in price in April. It will put extra pressure on squeezed families. This week, we got research from consumer group Which that found that already around 2.5 million households missed or defaulted on must-pay domestic outgoings, loans or credit card payments in March. So what can you do, not just to beat the hikes, Helen, but also to save yourself a bit of money? Just, if you would, run through what is going up in price.
Yeah, the top trumps of things that are getting more expensive over the first week of April. These changes are happening. There's quite a lot. So the first thing is energy prices. The energy price guarantee cap that we've had for the last few months is actually staying the same. So that's staying at £2,500 a year for the average household. But what's changing is that the energy support scheme, so that's those payments of £66 and £67 that people have been getting every month, that's coming to an end. So in real terms, households are going to be, on average, £400 worse off in the coming months. Secondly, your mobile phone bills are going up. So that's 14.4% for most providers, broadband as well. Charges for water in England are going up by an average of 7.5%. That's the biggest increase in almost 2 decades. That means about £31 more a year on average for the typical customer. NHS prescriptions going up by 30p to £9.65 on April the 1st. Some tax changes as well. So from April the 6th, capital gains tax, the profit you can make before you owe that tax will be halved. So that's going down to £6,150. There's also some changes for dividend tax. So that allowance is also being reduced. Some smaller stuff, first class stamps will now cost more than £1 for the first time. They're going up by 16% to £1.10 on April the 3rd. And finally, council tax is going up by up to 5% from April the 1st. That obviously depends on where you live, but previously they could only put the bills up by 3%. That's now up to 5%. So the typical family in a Band D property will probably see their council tax bill go above £2,000 a year for the first time. So all in all, lots of quite bad news.
I did a bit of a back of the whatever packet maths on this one, and I will be paying personally about £644 a year. And do you know what kept me up last night? I woke up and thought about it. Must buy myself some stamps before the rises come in. Simon, we had some research from Which showing that 2.5 million households missed or defaulted on must-pay domestic outgoings, loans or credit card payments in March. Doesn't look good already. And then we've got all these rises that Helen's just outlined coming up in April.
Yes, and what's concerning actually is within those figures, the number of people not managing to meet their mortgage payments. Before we go any further into this, it's really important that if you can't afford to pay a bill, that rather than just try to hope that the problem goes away or decide that it will only be made worse by telling the provider that you can't pay the bill, the best thing you can possibly do is actually come clean and say to the provider, I can't afford this bill. What can you do to help me? And with varying degrees of forbearance, which is the fancy financial system word for trying to be nice to your customers and help them when they're struggling, they will try to be nice to you and help you when you're struggling. And if they're not nice to you, then you need to do something like perhaps go speak to citizens advice or something like that. The worst thing you can possibly do is just not make the payment, because you'll then default on the payment. They'll then come after you. you'll probably then start ignoring the letters chasing you for it, because you'll decide that if you've already taken that strategy once, you're going to plow on ahead with it, and eventually you'll end up with a black mark on your credit record that's going to cause you many more problems in years to come. And you know what? There's even like some really low grade stuff suddenly causes people major problems down the line when they do things like go to apply for a mortgage or something like that. So do speed. The question is, what can you do to stop your bills going up so much, isn't it? And actually, with some of these things, you can do something. Energy bills, you're a bit stuffed there, to be honest.
Well, absolutely. We got some news this week. OVO, was it this week, launching the first fix lower than the energy cap? But yeah.
Only for existing customers.
Yeah.
And it's 2,250. The energy price cap is 2,500, and that has been kept there from April through to July. I should say the energy price guarantee, because the energy price cap is actually higher, but the energy price guarantee caps what you pay on the cap. However, all the predictions are that the energy price cap is going to start falling from the next time it's set in July, and potentially down to 2,000 or maybe below 2,000. So what you're being offered there by OVO is the chance to fix at a rate that will potentially save you money for 3 months, but then end up costing you more money as energy prices start to fall. And this is the risk that people face as more fixed rate energy deals start to come to the market, is they're going to have to make a decision on, do I go for certainty, or do I go for potentially paying over the odds if energy prices come down faster than people think? And I think the OVO deal, hats off to OVO for bringing out a fixed rate tariff and offering it to its customers that's below the energy price guarantee level. We should definitely applaud that. But it's the pricing of it is a product of the fact that it's the only one around.
Just bear with me here when I ask you, energy, we still have a conflict going on in Ukraine, supply issues, still a problem. Why does everybody think that the price of energy is going to go down?
Because it spiked so high off the back of, firstly, energy prices were already spiking before Russia decided to invade Ukraine. Russia's invasion of Ukraine caused energy prices to spike even higher due to the dependence of large parts of Europe on Russian gas, and the fact that even places that weren't dependent on Russian gas but were dependent on imported gas, like the UK, buy gas on the open market. And if the price is driven up by Russia and Ukraine, then the price goes up for everyone. You've then got on top of that all of the trading that goes on, which gives a tailwind. When prices are going up, it helps push them up even further. And when prices are going down, it helps push them down, because you've got traders all desperately trying to make money in one direction. And you might have a few bucking the trend and going, actually, I think prices are going to fall rather than rise. But those contrarian positions are not the ones that tend to give the wind in the sails of the direction of the market. And what happened since then is Europe largely weaned itself off Russian gas, managed to fill gas storage better than expected last summer. There was a spike in energy prices again last summer as Europe scrambled to fill its gas storage. And then since then, they've started to come down. It was helped by a mild winter overall. The start of winter was milder. The end of autumn, start of winter was milder than the tail end of winter. But fortunately, by that point, those gas reserves hadn't been drawn on as much. That reduced the demand in the open market for buying the gas and so on, and has helped to reduce the cost. And also, you've got to factor in the bit where things are settled down, in the sense that Russia, having invaded Ukraine, is now a year past us, and it's a known situation versus the sudden sharp moves and price moves of an unknown situation, as there was when the invasion first happened. The bad news is that the Russia and Ukraine conflict is still going on, and it looks really bad. The good news for us at home, not suffering from that in the same way, is that our energy prices are going down.
Right. So the upshot of that, to come full circle, is don't fix yet. So
Yeah,
there are other ways to
I'd be
save on your
very,
energy bills.
I'd be very wary about fixing. Yeah, you're not. If you look at that £250 saving versus the £2,500 energy price guarantee, then divide that by 12. You're saving 20 quid a month. Is it really worth it? Especially when it looks like prices are going to fall further. There will come a point where I think it's definitely worth considering a fix. In the meantime, it's back to the old tips on trying to save money on an energy bill, using less energy.
Kit warmers.
I mean, the good news is that it is now April, and
Hello.
that means,
has anyone told the weather? It's still cold and rainy and horrible.
It will eventually get warmer, and we will need to use our heating less, and people's costs drop substantially. The flip side to that is that the £67 a month bung that Rishi's been giving us ever since autumn started is about to drop out of people's energy bills. So you're not going to be getting your £67 rebate anymore. So it is, back to the old energy saving measures, and then fingers crossed that prices fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's energy, Helen. Plenty of other things that we can try and avoid. I said there about stamps. The reason it kept me awake is because they are going up in price. And if you buy them now, you can buy them at the older price, because obviously I send so many letters.
And the thing about those stamps is what you want to do is buy the stamps now before the price goes up, and then send all the letters as soon as you can before the postal system collapses.
Well, that's true. So if anyone's birthday is in September or October, and normally I send you a card that's late, you're going to get one early this year. Just pack it all in now. So Helen, what else can you do apart from buying in advance? If you do buy stamps, by the way, make sure they're the new versions with barcodes, not the older ones, because then you have to use them by, I think it's July the 31st or something. But what else, Helen?
Yeah, there are a few things you can do. So on the prescriptions, there is a scheme where I think this works out if you get more than 2 prescriptions a month, you can pay for them in advance for a sort of a set rate, and I think that will save you a bit of money if you're a person who gets a lot of prescriptions. So that's worth looking into. On the broadband and mobile stuff, if you're really struggling, providers do offer discounted social tariffs, normally to people on certain benefits. But like with the energy bills, if you are struggling, worth giving your provider a call. The other obvious thing to do, something I'm kind of looking at doing myself, is when your phone contract finishes, maybe go onto a SIM-only deal if you've got a phone that's still working, because then you're not paying the ludicrously high cost of getting a new iPhone, or other phones are available, but that really bumps your bills up. So SIM-only contracts can be just a few pounds a month in some cases. On the water bills, you can potentially save if you look into getting a water meter. Obviously, it depends on how much water you use. If you're a very long showerer, having a meter might not actually work out for you, because it will just prove to your water company that you use quite a lot of water. But if you do kind of keep tabs on your usage, getting a meter could bring your bills down. I think that's about it on the savings tips, other than stashing stamps ahead of time. So yeah, there are a few things you can do. But as Simon said, if you're really struggling with things like bills, always worth having a chat to your supplier, because energy suppliers in particular, they do have to offer help to some customers that are struggling. That's part of what we pay for in our energy bills, is these schemes they run for people who are in difficulty. So definitely worth getting in touch.
One of my biggest rises going up, and I'm sure for other people as well, council tax changes, Helen?
Yeah, I mean, not really that much you can do about council tax, unfortunately.
Just make sure that if you are entitled to something, single person, disabled person, student, etc., just make sure that you've got what you're entitled to, and maybe challenge your band. But then it could go up.
Exactly. The single person discount is one that's definitely worth looking into. So that's if you live alone, that's a 25% cut on your bill. Although when I've lived alone in the past, I've always thought that's, kind of unfair anyway. Surely it should be like a 50% discount, but maybe that's just me.
Helen, I think you just reinvented the poll tax, and it didn't prove to be that popular. I mean, arguably the poll tax was a much fairer system in order of charging per individual, but yeah, that's why that doesn't happen.
Fair. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, you can challenge your band, but I've kind of looked into this in the past when readers have written in about it. And the thing about challenging your band is it can actually go up as well as down. It can also inadvertently kind of affect your neighbours' council tax bands as well, if your property is re-rated. So definitely one to
That could go down badly.
Caution, yeah, if you don't want everyone on your street to absolutely hate you. But it is one that's worth kind of looking into. Do a bit of research and maybe look at other properties in the area, ask your neighbours and do a bit of kind of sleuthing, but approach with caution, I would say.
Absolutely.
We had a wonderful cautionary tale on that many years ago. I mean, I'm talking like probably 15 years ago. I'm showing my This Is Money age here, where somebody did challenge their council tax band because they were on a different rate to the whole of the rest of their cul-de-sac, and they thought that was unfair. And the revaluation people agreed with them and said that yes, the whole of the rest of the cul-de-sac was on the wrong rate and put up their whole street's council tax bands.
Ooh. Well, at least it's fair, I suppose.
Yeah, and look, just on the mobile thing as well, the SIM-only stuff. Okay, victory one for Simon Lambert. I only pay £8 a month for my SIM-only mobile contract with Virgin. And that basically includes 15 gigabytes of data and unlimited minutes because I already own the phone and I'm not that fussed about upgrading the phone. And I bought the phone. And then once I'd finished paying for the phone, I actually just bought it outright. In fact, what I did was Apple did this thing where you could buy it with 0% interest and pay it off over 24 months. So I just did that because I decided that I might slightly win on that versus the paying for it outright. But yeah, then the SIM only thing is, £8 a month. And that's what, compared to if you're paying £40 a month or something, that's saving you quite a lot of money. But loser Simon Lambert.
Yeah.
Guess which mug's paying Sky £70 a month for his TV and broadband, and the broadband doesn't even work properly. When I could be paying probably 40 if I just A, challenge Sky to give me a better deal, and B, switch to somebody else. So yeah, there you go. You win, you lose. So actually, I'm netting out pretty much even on those two things at the moment. In one, I'm winning, and in the other, I'm an absolute loser idiot who should really make his broadband and TV much cheaper.
Well, there you go. There's something for you to do, Simon, though, isn't there? Right. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the tax changes, or indeed freezes, which are having equally a large impact in April. So do you know, though, your current tax bracket? You think, yeah, of course I do. Well, according to new analysis by Barclays Wealth, 1 in 3 of those earning over 50 grand don't know theirs. Simon, how's that possible? And why does it matter?
Fiscal drag. That's how it's possible. People, I think, don't realise that maybe they've been dragged into the 40% tax rate, which sounds massively puzzling to all of us who will know how much we earn and what the tax bands are, and would probably sound quite puzzling to many people listening to this podcast. But you've cleared the hurdle of being interested enough in money to be listening to the This Is Money podcast. We've cleared the extra hurdle of being interested enough to actually be on the This Is Money podcast. Most of the population, sadly for our podcast listening figures, most of the population don't clear either of those hurdles. I mean, it's lucky they don't clear the second hurdle. Otherwise, this podcast would be a mess of 68 million people who are trying to talk at once. But, there are lots of people out there who just don't engage with this stuff. And this is something that we always find really important when we're writing guides to things, is we always presume no knowledge. We try not to talk down to people. Very, very important not to talk down to people. But we presume that you need to explain what everything is. Don't use jargon and not explain it, ranging from the really complicated stuff like quantitative easing to explaining what the personal allowance is, right? Relevant to the tax conversation now. But quite often what you find is that actually the point where you think you need to start, you actually need to jump back an extra level beyond that, because lots of people really just don't engage with this stuff. So I can see it being entirely plausible that many people don't know what their tax rate is. I would advise people to know. But then if you ask people, how much, what's your tax rate? And they say 20%, The answer isn't really 20%, is it? It's 32% because of national insurance. That is effectively an extra income tax. So there you go. And then we've had the freezes to the thresholds, which is what is causing the fiscal drag. Jeremy Hunt decided that the higher rate tax band was going nowhere. And so that is going to drag even more people into paying 40% tax. There is a record number of people paying 40% tax. It is a way, way more people paying 40% tax than there were some years ago. He is also pulling down the 45p tax rate, and that is going to go from starting at £150,000 to starting at 125,140, which sounds like a weirdly precise number, doesn't it?
Right, we're going to delve into those sorts of weird quirks and changes to the system. But Helen, give us an idea, right? Basically, how do tax bands work? What do you pay? And then how can we reduce some of the tax we owe?
Sure. So the first thing to know is everyone has a personal allowance, which is £12,570. That's the amount of income that you can earn without having to pay any tax on it. Above that, as we said, tax is charged in bands, and you pay tax on that chunk of income at a certain rate. So the basic rate is 20%, higher rate is 40%, and the additional rate is 45%. So, for example, someone who was earning, say, £60,000 would pay no tax on the first £12,570, 20% tax on the amount between £12,571 and £50,270, and then 40% on anything above that. So it's in these bands. The way that you can reduce that, there's two main ways of doing it. One way is to pay more money into pension. So pension saving is tax-free. You pay more money from your salary into pension. That means there's less money left over to be subject to income tax. The other way is to put money into things like tax-free savings. So ISAs, you can put up to £20,000 each year into an ISA tax-free, and that's another way to protect some of your income from being taxed. There are other sort of small things you can do, like making sort of charitable donations out of your pay packet, but they're the two main ways if you want to significantly cut down the amount of tax that you owe.
All right then, Simon, let's talk about the quirks to the tax system, shall we? So every year, hundreds of thousands of people fall into absurd tax traps. So you guys say on This Is Money that penalise them for doing well at work. These are effectively cliff edges in the tax system. Receive just a tiny pay rise and suddenly you're forced to hand the taxman a vast chunk of every extra pound heading your way. So earlier this month, the Chancellor introduced the most extreme cliff edge yet. Under reforms designed to keep more women in work, parents earning £99,999.99 could miss out on 20 grand's worth of free childcare if their salary grows by as little as 1 penny. Simon, you have focused your column this week on whether the Chancellor will be brave enough to fix Britain's tax mess, from the child benefit trap to a £20,000 childcare penalty and 60p tax. Tell us more.
Not only would you lose £20,000 if you got a 1 penny pay rise, which leads to an astonishing marginal tax rate of 200 million%, according to the maths done by an expert for Money Mail and This Is Money this week. You'd be infuriated by the fact that your employer gave you a 1p pay rise, wouldn't you? But it highlights the edge case. And there are some edge cases around where people end up paying ridiculous marginal rates of tax. To go back to the original conversation before this about tax, marginal rate of tax, what's that? It's the rate of tax that you pay on the next pound that you earn, basically. So the tax rates go 20%, 40%, 45%, but the marginal rate of tax is effectively how much tax you pay on that next pound you earn. And that's where things pinging in from all over the place can start to cause these really bad quirks of the tax system. So, for example, there is a marginal tax rate of 96%, which hits people who start to have their child benefit taken off them £50,000 and also start to lose some benefits, such as universal credit. There's some cut-offs there. There's a marginal tax rate of 82% for higher rate, additional rate taxpayers when they start having their savings allowance, when they have their savings allowance taken off them. And then the retraction of pensions allowances causes a marginal tax rate of 69.5%. Right. So, but these are mainly edge cases. The three that I've picked up on in my column are two of them are something that we've been banging the drum on for ages on This Is Money and This Is Money podcast. The other is the childcare system. Now, to tackle the childcare system first, in the budget, Jeremy Hunt stood up and, to great fanfare from himself, extended his 30 hours free childcare scheme to children over the age of 9 months. At the moment, it's only older young children, preschool children, right? Acknowledging the sky-high cost of Britain's nurseries and childcare and how much more expensive it was than our European peers, and how this was all about boosting the workforce, about productivity, about prosperity, having also delivered in his speech a lecture on why no one should ever have to not work because of tax, which is why he removed the lifetime allowance and upped the annual pensions allowance to help out the doctors and everybody else. He said that he was going to extend 30 hours free childcare. Now, what he didn't do was remove a trap in the 30 hours free childcare system that already existed, which is that if either parent's earnings rise above £100,000, the family loses 30 hours free childcare completely. Now, in expanding that existing system, but declining to fix the cliff edge, Mr. Hunt achieved the impressive feat of making a grossly unfair scenario even worse. You have to take your hat off to somebody who manages to achieve this with a tax and welfare system. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is usually pretty measured, in its verdicts on things, it calls stuff out when stuff needs to be called out. But it said the distortions that this can create are among the most severe you will ever see within a tax and benefit system. And in another part of its analysis, referred to it as absurd. A parent with a 1-year-old and 3-year-old child in full-time childcare based on average charges in England would find their disposable income would fall by £14,500 if that pre-tax income crossed the £100,000 mark. And they wouldn't regain the loss of the childcare costs until their pre-tax income hit £134,500. Now, Robert Joyce of the IFS said, a presumably unintended effect of today's childcare announcement is to exacerbate one of the most severe distortions you are ever likely to see within a tax and benefit system. I think he was being a bit generous there. Unintended effect. Chancellor's a pretty smart man, isn't he? He's got a lot of very, very clever people working for him in the Treasury. Are we honestly meant to believe that when he stood up and announced that policy, he didn't know about the £100,000 cliff edge? He didn't know that, okay, yes, for a relatively small number of people, but that those people would be hit by what has been declared to be the most unfair part of the tax and welfare system ever. And that when you compute it at its most sort of edge casey scenario, which is not a proper word, it delivers a 200 million% marginal tax rate. I don't believe that for 1 minute. Of course, Jeremy Hunt knew about that cliff edge. Of course, he knew about the impact there. And yet he decided to plough ahead regardless and not fix it.
You know why?
Well, I don't know. Why wouldn't you do it? But then, when he reduced the 45p tax rate threshold to 125,140, that curiously precise number in the autumn statement, he also chose not to remove the 60p marginal income tax rate that comes before it, because the personal allowance is removed above £100,000 at the rate of 50p for every extra £1 earned. This has the effect of adding 50% to the income tax rate, which is 40%, taking it to a 60% marginal income tax rate. And the reason why he chose that number is because it's the exact point at which the personal allowance removal stops. So of course he knew that all of the people before they reached 45% tax would have been paying 60% marginal tax rates, but he chose to do it all the same. But, to be fair, every single Tory chancellor that we have had since George Osborne has totally failed to tackle that bit of the tax code, where for some bizarre reason we think it's okay to charge people 60% tax before people earning more than them only pay a lower rate of tax at 45p. I mean, obviously it's very difficult to garner sympathy for people earning more than £100,000. That's an awful lot of money, but those people do pay an awful lot of tax. They are high earners, but chances are they're going to go on to be higher earners. And you want to make them feel that they've been treated fairly on their way up through the tax system so that they continue to pay lots and lots of tax, not make them think that they've been treated unfairly. And then we do it to people even further down the tax system with the child benefit removal. I mean, this was George Osborne's policy. The taper removes child benefit once one parent's earnings go above £50,000 until it's all gone at £60,000. This is a policy so inherently unfair that it means you could have two parents between them earning £99,000 and they still get full child benefit, but a family where only one parent works and they earn £51,000 and they get zero. It's also so badly designed that it made child benefit cause state pension chaos, because people didn't twig that by not registering for child benefit and then not taking it, they would not be then accruing their state pension in years to come. Mothers who supposedly were meant to realise this from the bounty pack of guff that they get given in a hospital. And this creates a marginal tax rate of 51% for a parent with one child, or 59% if they have two children. And no chancellor since George Osborne's bothered to do anything about that either. And there's also a massive degree of fiscal drag going on here. If that £100,000 level for the personal allowance removal had moved up with inflation, it would now be £159,500, right? Why that hasn't moved, answers on a postcard. If the 50,000 child benefit taper level had risen with inflation since 2013, it would be £70,000. If the 30 hours free childcare level had moved up with inflation since it was introduced in 2017, it would be £129,500. But I would argue that lifting the unfair bits of the tax system doesn't really solve the problem. And it doesn't achieve that goal of trying to build faith in the tax system. A better move would be to get rid of these below the belt bits altogether. Will we ever get a chancellor brave enough to fix that mess? Certainly hasn't been one from the party supposedly of low and fair taxation, has it?
I was going to say, if we're not going to get one this time round, we probably won't next time, depending on who wins the next election. That's it for part one.
I'm joined now by Ben Laidler of eToro for our weekly look at what's been going on the markets. Ben, what's the past week been like?
Pretty good. Positive week for the FTSE, good week for sterling. Basically both driven by these banking sector fears that have eased back. Markets have now regained all the losses that we saw during this bank scare of March. We've also just closing the first quarter, which also shows FTSE 100 and other global markets in the green. Crypto assets and the tech sector were the best quarterly performers, whilst commodities and the dollar were the laggards. And this performance ranking was basically the opposite of what we saw last year.
Which just goes to show that predicting what's going to happen next on the markets is a tricky task. If you'd have raised your head above the parapet at the end of December and said, I think that tech stocks and crypto are going to be the winners, then people would have given you a bit of a mocking, wouldn't they?
Pretty much, yep.
And what do we have to look forward to next week?
So it's going to be a quieter week. We have a very welcome 4-day Easter weekend, which is going to curtail it. But I think two things to watch. I think the focus will be Tuesday's OPEC meeting. Lower oil prices have maybe hurt some investors, but they've been a big help to the ongoing inflation fight. And secondly, the jobs report in the US on Friday. Hopefully that will be somewhat cooler than last month. This will really set the tone, I think, for the Fed to stop its dramatic interest rate cycle, which has been reverberating around the world.
Okay, Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Now, with the end of the tax year imminent, now is a good time to check you are making the most of your tax-friendly benefits. This is particularly important for those high earners that we've just been talking about. But what do you need to do before the calendar flips over to a new tax year on the 6th of April? Now, you guys asked some financial experts what they would recommend for high earners, particularly Helen. What did they say?
So we've already mentioned this, but the number one thing that these experts suggested was to use your ISA allowance. So that's one of the top ways to stop tax eating away at your money. So your ISA allowance every year is £20,000. You want to use as much of that as possible before the tax calendar flips over on the 6th of April. So any savings that you have that aren't in an ISA, might be a good idea to think about putting them into one, and then that allowance will refresh on the 6th of April, so you can start saving into one again. ISAs, you can normally change providers. You can transfer them without losing their tax-free status, as long as you kind of stay within the rules of only saving into one of each type every year. So it's a good time to think about that if you haven't already. One of the other changes, and this probably, as you said, applies more to higher earners, the tax-free capital gains tax allowance is being reduced quite significantly in April. So that's going from its current limit of £12,300 to just £6,000. That was something that was brought in the autumn statement. It's also going to go down again to £3,000 in April 2024. So if you have things like profits on investments that aren't currently within a tax efficient wrapper, such as an ISA or a pension, you might want to think about making disposals on that before that allowance goes down. Anyone who's investing, that's something to think about. As we mentioned before, also think about maybe increasing your private or workplace pension contributions. If you're able to, that's a very tax-friendly way to save, although obviously remember that you won't be able to get the money until you're 55. And yeah, as Simon said, think about whether you're getting caught out by this 60% tax trap. It's something that's very complicated, isn't it? And I think, as we sort of mentioned before, the government is kind of trading on people's lack of understanding about these kind of things. This is extremely complicated stuff for the normal person who's maybe not that interested in personal finance. But it's definitely worth, if you're in that over £100,000 a year bracket, kind of interrogating this and checking where you're at with it. Other things you might want to think about, inheritance tax is something that you might want to think about. So currently that's payable at 40%, but an extra allowance, the residence nil rate band, increases the threshold by £175,000 if you leave your home to direct descendants. So you might want to think about if you're going to be subject to more tax, perhaps giving away some of your money if that's something that you're able to do. And finally, looking at other kind of smaller tax reliefs you might be able to get, for example, by donating money to charity, or if you're self-employed or you have work-related expenses, seeing if you can get any tax relief on those kind of things.
Simon, anything to add to that?
I guess just that if you are a very high earner, then it is definitely, you're probably in the position where it starts to become worth paying for financial advice or tax planning or wealth management, whichever route financial planning, whichever route that you decide to go down. You start getting into the scenario where the amount of money that could be saved for you will offset the cost of the fees. Secondly, that all of this stuff is tax avoidance. Paying into an ISA is tax avoidance, but it's all using the legitimate things that people are offered in order to manage their finances, and there's no shame in doing that, especially when, as we talked about, people are paying substantial amounts of tax anyway. And also that one of these things that often gets said is, well, just pay some more money into your pension. That's the number one way to do all of this stuff. Just pay some more money into your pension. Goes back to what we were talking about at the top of the show about, trying to beat some of these sort of tax rises and bill rises and everything. Get some money back by paying some more into your pension. It's like most people just don't have the money to pay more into their pension. There's that argument that, oh, well, people should just take themselves below the child benefit threshold or below the personal allowance removal threshold by paying some more into their pension. But even those people who are earning lots of money don't just have extra money quite often to pay into their pension. But it is definitely worth thinking about things like, if you've got savings or investments outside of an ISA, getting them into an ISA You can get them into a pension, but you have to be aware that you will not be able to get that money until you are currently age 55, but that's going up to age 57 pretty soon and is probably going to keep going up beyond that. Oh, and also, if you are a first-time buyer, as in you've never owned a property before, get a lifetime ISA. You can pay up to £4,000 a year into it and get a 25% bonus from the government, which gives you £1,000 for free on your £4,000. There are not many places in this world where you can legitimately get an instant 25% return. And if anybody normally offers you an instant 25% return, they're a fraudster. In this case, it's not. It's the government bunging you money. You get the same bung from putting the money in your pension, but you have to wait ages to get that. So a lifetime ISA, great for a first-time buyer, not so great as a retirement savings tool. But if you qualify for one and you are saving for your first home, take every single little bit of help that you can get and take that lifetime ISA 25% bung.
Good advice there, Simon. Right, talking about ISAs, Helen, Santander holds top spot at the moment with best one-year deal paying 4.15%. Meanwhile, savers can get 3.2% on easy access. So you have outlined the top 5 cash ISAs. Firstly, cash ISAs, worth it?
Yeah, if you need your savings to be protected from tax. So there are going to be people who they're not going to get enough savings interest to need to necessarily put their money in an ISA at current rates. Rates on easy access savings accounts, you can still do better than an easy access cash ISA. So first thing to say is to work out whether you would be subject to tax on your savings anyway. But presuming that you would be, and you do need this tax-free wrapper, our savings guru, Ed Magnus, has rounded up his top 5 favourite ISAs. So number 1 in the top table, it's Synergy Bank's Triple Access ISA, and that's a rate of 3.2%, that's actually around about the same rate that you would get on one of the top easy access accounts. So that's a good deal. Only costs £1 to open. It accepts transfers in, so you can put in money from another ISA into that account. However, you can only open and manage it online, so no branches. If you want to manage it in person, you can't do that. As with all of the accounts in our list, this is fully FSCS protected, so up to £85,000, your money is safe if anything goes wrong with the provider. To run down the other ones on the list, so Hargreaves Lansdowne's limited access account, that's a 3% rate, again £1 to open. It's actually provided by Coventry Building Society, but it's done via Hargreaves Lansdowne's platform. Again, actually want to mention on that and the Synergy one, these are limited access. So while you can get your hands on your money, there will be limits on how many times you can do that per year. So that's something to check out if you are the kind of person who thinks that you are going to have to dip into your savings more than, say, sort of once or twice a year. Looking at fixed rate ISAs, Santander, this is a bit of a surprise because the big banks often don't have the best savings rates. They tend to be often fairly pitiful, but fair play to Santander. This is a top rate. So it's a 1-year fixed cash ISA, and that's a rate of 4.15%. You do have to put in at least £500 to open it. You can also get a £50 e-voucher when you transfer in a non-Santander ISA of £10,000 or more. So it could be an extra little bonus for people who do have bigger savings. Santander is also on the list again for its 18-month fixed account, which is 4.25%. That has mostly the same terms as the one I've just mentioned. And finally, Moneybox Cash Lifetime ISA. So this is one of the accounts that Simon's just mentioned, which are a pretty good idea for anyone saving for their first home. That's got an interest rate of 3.5%, and you'll get that interest obviously on top of the government bonus. So this is the best cash ISA out there at the moment. Worth considering. So that is our rundown of the top trumps of cash ISAs.
Very good, Helen. Simon, nice to see the big banks getting involved.
It is nice to see the big banks getting involved finally. This is the best cash ISA season that we have had for absolutely ages. And I know that the cash ISA season is not as exciting for most people as the football season or summer, for example, another popular season. But, cash ISA season, if you want to make the most of your money, it's a good thing to celebrate that it's there. And I think that my favourite out of all of these deals is that cheeky little 18-month Santander number, that 4.25% rate that you're getting for doing an 18-month fix rather than a 1-year fix is actually also better than its 2-year fix as well. So it's a bit of a sweet spot. And yes, it's not going to probably change the world for you, that extra little bit of interest on your savings, but it's a nice little rate. And I don't think that savings rates are going to be topping that over the next 18 months. I could be wrong, but I don't think. I reckon if you've got some money to lock away for 18 months, that's not a bad deal.
All right, then. That's it for this week. You can keep up to date with all the latest breaking money news. Just go to thisismoney.co.uk or download the app. And if you have any comments or questions for the team or anything you'd like them to look into, Simon.
You can email us at editor@thisismoney.co.uk. You can tweet us at thisismoney, and you can come to thisismoney.co.uk/podcast to find all podcasts past and join in the debate and read the comments. And before you listen to the next episode of the This Is Money podcast, the tax year will end. All that stuff we talked about, do it now, please. Don't be like me, leave it to the last minute and make a mess of stuff.
Exactly. Well done. And if you like our podcast, why not rate us wherever you found us? It helps other people find us too.
Don't forget, you can stay on top of what's going on in the markets by tuning in to the Digest and Invest podcast by eToro. Go to your regular podcast platform and listen on the go. Digest and Invest by eToro, the podcast for those interested in trading and investing.